There we go. So let's talk a little bit more about the industry. I think that's important for you to understand the industry a little bit. So again, when we talk about, and this is a survey done by Edison Research, the Infinite Dial 2022, the percentage of people who are familiar with podcasting is really quite large in the US. 79% of all of the people in the US are familiar with podcasting. They may have listened to one or two in the past. They may be regular listeners, but they're familiar with this type of media. And the percentage that have ever listened to a podcast, 62%. So 62% of the US population has listened, 12 and above that is, have listened to a podcast before. So that's a fairly large number of people who are familiar with it and have listened to it. Now, we talked about how many percentage have listened to the podcast in the last week. And we've also talked about, I got this in here somewhere, just a minute. Move this down a little bit. There we go. Last month, and 28% who listened in the last week. And those are large numbers of people who listen to podcasts. A great way to get your message out there and get your message across. And where do they listen? Now, how many of you think about, if we say 62.5, how many of you, and you might want to drop this in the chat, how many of you think, where does the 62% listen? Where do they listen most? The 62%? Anyone want to venture a guess? Car, cell phone, on their phone, car. Very interesting. Now, this one, I think this one is going to surprise you. 62.5 listen at home. So they're listening it at home. And a smaller number listen to it in their vehicle. Much different than what we probably expect. Okay, so the majority listen at home. Maybe they're working out at home, maybe before they go to sleep, maybe when they're doing cooking around the house, whatever the case may be, majority of people are listening to podcasts at home. Let's talk a little bit about how many people, or what is the weekly number. Just to give you a general idea, and this may or may not influence you in your decision to podcast or not to podcast. And so we can see here that the number of people and how many podcasts they listen per week on average, which 8 is the average number, which is still a very large number for those who do listen in. And here, men versus women, you'll notice that the number has continually gone up, except for last year when it dropped down a little bit. I don't know, I don't have a reason why. Maybe it's because we've come to the end of the pandemic. 2020, when the pandemic hit, and 2021, much higher. People were at home, they weren't going out. And now in 2022, people have started to go out more, do more things outside. So potentially a drop for that reason. And monthly podcast consumers, slightly equal between women and men a little bit more. Podcast consumers, we can see that, just move this up here, very good. We can see that the age of 55 and older is the smallest group, partly because more than likely many of them are out of the business cycle. They're not maybe as familiar with it. They're not always on their iPhones or cell phones. Again, this is not to say that, oh, people over 55 are not hip with all of those things, but they may be less so, and they may be listening less than before. Okay, and finally, who as far as any sort of racial profile, we can see here what this particular survey has done. And this is kind of the leading survey in the industry, in the podcasting industry. So you get a rough idea of who is listening, how often are they listening, and it is a ripe place for people to do podcasting and potentially get themselves known and possibly even make some money. But like any industry, of course, there are lots and lots of factors that go in.